And over to yourself.
Thank you. Welcome everyone. I'll read the House rules. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording is archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when they're not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen on screen, or use the raise hand function. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and/or to grab the attention of the chair or the Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chair or Democratic Officer know. If they have a webcam, then they should try turning this off, as this will help with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth so they can be hear and be heard. So now we've got that out of the way, we'll start the meeting. So number one, any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, I have two from myself, Councillor Payne, committee member, and also Councillor Penn. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I don't have any apologies, so we'll move on to item 2. So the minutes of the meeting held on 9th of June 2022. Is everyone happy to move and note those? Thumbs up. Good. Agenda item 3, received declarations of interest. Amy, have we had any of those?
Nothing prior, Chair.
Great. So next, I'd like to move agenda item 9, which is the summary of the Eston inspection outcomes for spring term 2022, from agenda item 9 to now, because we've got guests, and as interesting as this committee is, I'm sure they don't want to stay watching all night. So if everyone's happy with that, moving agenda item 9 up, good. So we'll move that up. So summary of Eston inspection outcomes. We've got Rebecca Connor from Stanwell and Samantha Daniels from.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, Gareth.
If I come in there, the curriculum for Wales is the presentation where we've got guests in. That's where Natalie, Sam, and Becky will be talking. And then
Fantastic.
The Eston, I'm afraid that's just me. I've got no guests with me for that.
That's all right. I misunderstood. Ignore me. That's probably best. So curriculum for Wales then, journey to 2022. Over to you, Caris.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm actually going to pass on, first of all, to Natalie Gould to give an update on the curriculum for Wales for you as a panel. Natalie is the Assistant Director for Curriculum and Professional Learning at Central South Consortium, and we have been having a termly update on the curriculum for Wales for this last academic year. And Natalie is joined today by 2 schools, Sam Daniels, her teacher of Victoria School in Penarth, and Becky Connor, who's a senior assistant head teacher at Stanwell School. And once Natalie's done a short update to members, both Becky and Sam to begin with, then Becky will provide us with an overview in terms of the work they've been doing as schools, but also as a cluster. So I'll pass over in the first instance to Natalie. Diolch yn fawr, Natalie.
Thanks, Caris. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me this evening. I do enjoy coming to these meetings and giving you updates. I am going to take us back very quickly just to the start of Curriculum for Wales today for any new members, and also really interested to hear and to share with you the journey of some of our schools. Right, so just to remind us, there has been whole-scale change over the past 5, 6, 7 years in Wales with regard to all elements of the education system. So that includes new teacher provision, the Leadership Academy, schools as learning organisations, the ALN reforms, school-to-school work and evaluation framework, and Curriculum for Wales at the heart of those reforms. Just to remind you then that the Curriculum and Assessment Act became law in April 2021, and you can see there the Act states the new curriculum requirement for learners from 3 to 16 in maintained and non-maintained nursery education in Wales. And you can find all the information around this legislation and everything else within the Hub website. So I'm not going to read this to you, but just to remind us, there is a framework around Curriculum for Wales. There are statutory elements, there are mandatory elements, and there is guidance. but everything comes back to that shared vision for education, which are the 4 purposes. So in order for our young people in Wales to realise those 4 purposes, that shared vision, schools need to design, adopt and implement a curriculum that fulfils the requirements as set out in the framework. The 4 purposes then are the shared vision and starting point and should inform all decisions around curriculum and assessment in schools. And this is what you'll hear from our schools this evening. They've been working on for a number of years, ready to roll out. So just to remind us that the statutory date for rollout for all young people up to end of primary school is this September. So everything becomes law in September with regard to those elements. And then there was a choice for secondary schools to either roll out year 7 from this September or to keep working towards that and roll out year 7, year 8 in 2023. And then the continual rollout year on year from there on in. So a curriculum, what does that mean? It means everything a learner experiences in pursuit of those 4 purposes. And schools have had to think about what they teach, how and why. So this booklet has been recently published by Welsh Government just to summarise those mandatory and statutory elements. And you can see there the legal requirements. So schools have to design, adopt and publish a summary, implement, keep that curriculum under review to ensure it's meeting the needs of learners. And there are some additional duties. I won't obviously have time to go into that now, but you'll hear of some of those from our schools. And obviously this booklet is available on Hub for everybody to see. The first element of that, of designing the curriculum, there are a number of mandatory and statutory elements. So I'll just give you a moment to read those. And there are a number of underpinning codes like the progression code, the relationships and sexuality education code that are there to give that guidance to schools when designing their curriculum. Last point from me before I do hand over to our schools, just to say that September is the start of rollout. So those legal requirements need to be met. However, the ongoing iterations, refinement, self-evaluation to ensure that curriculum is meeting the needs of all the learners in schools goes way beyond and ongoing right into forever, I suppose. As long as a school is open, they should be making sure that they're self-evaluating, that they're ensuring that their curriculum meets the needs of their pupils. So September is the start. I'm not sure, Caris, who's speaking first.
It's Sam first, the head teacher of, Samantha Daniels, head teacher of Victoria Primary, who's giving a perspective from a primary school. Diolch, Sam.
Thank you.
Diolch. Hello, I'm Sam Daniels, head teacher of Victoria Primary School. First of all, thank you for inviting me to talk to you about our curriculum journey and the importance of collaboration in designing a successful curriculum. So our journey at Victoria has been made up of, I suppose, many side streets, a few diversions along the way, and sometimes feeling like we didn't have the map, if I'm honest. But the main road has and always will be for us embedded high quality teaching and learning. The 4 purposes are right at the heart of everything that we do at Victoria. However, we knew that if we didn't have high quality teaching and learning in place, then really we weren't doing the best for our pupils. So back at the start of our journey, we decided to focus on the 12 pedagogical principles, so that regardless of the content of the curriculum for Wales, as a school, we would be consistent in our understanding of what high quality learning experience looked like, and also be consistent in the terminology we used during our professional learning discussions, because professional learning really went to the forefront of making sure that everybody was on the same page as we embarked on this journey. So we started way back by self-assessing ourselves against the 12 pedagogical principles. And then I myself wrote a bespoke training package for our school called the Effective Teaching Programme. And this was to address the areas for improvement that had been identified by the staff. So, for example, assessment for learning, effective questioning, meaningful context, and most importantly, differentiation. So the professional learning package followed the same cycle regardless of the theme. We'd always start with an inset looking at professional discussion and research. We would then trial new ideas and concepts. And then there would be a whole school learning walk so that everybody could see the practice that was going on in our school and take those golden nuggets with them. And then right at the end, back to professional discussion based around how does this impact on me as a teacher, my phase, and the school as a whole in order to secure the best outcomes for our children. We were making excellent progress and then lockdown happened. This was a huge learning curve for all of us as we got to grips with effective online learning and ensuring that our children received the best experiences under the circumstances. And it really was a very rocky start, but by the end of it, we had a daily average of 98% engagement. So clearly we were doing something right and we needed to harness this as the children came back into school. Now, as a school, we've always worked very much through the development of change on an acronym called MADE. And the MADE stands for what will we maintain, what will we amend, what will we introduce, and what will we discard. Now, not only are the staff very familiar with this, but so are the children. So we have a pupil curriculum group that go from age 7 to 11, very powerful group in the school. And we were really keen that they had a say in what was happening in terms of the online learning. So blended learning was a success. We knew that. We knew that it had gone very well in terms of our online learning, and we'd had 100% positive feedback from parents. So we now needed to investigate why and how we could replicate this in a school situation. And the children were really clear in their MADE responses. So they came up with this is why they felt that online learning had been successful. They had opportunities for collaborative and independent learning. They were able to present their work in any way that they wanted to. They didn't have books as such. They were able to use PowerPoint. They were able to use Seesaw, lots of online learning techniques. They liked having personal feedback from the class teacher, because what we did is although we were available all day for the children, we did live lessons, but we also brought them in small groups to give them individual feedback. And they really liked that personal touch. Not having reams of marking, which we know isn't very effective, but actually having the feedback from teachers. They liked a flexible timetable. So at the start of the day, the teacher would give them the learning opportunities that were available, and they would choose how they wanted to do them. And then lastly, which was really important, is because some of the lessons were recorded, the children were able to go back and rewatch them through the day to just spark their ideas about what they needed to do. And if they were stuck, rather than going to the teacher because they couldn't do that, they would go back and watch the video. And when I spoke to the teachers, they felt a lot the same way that the children had done. So we went back to our professional learning package and we used the same cycle, but now with a blended learning or rotational learning focus. That was in September. We were hit with COVID quite bad at the start, but 1 year later, we now are a very different school. We have very successful practice in place. The children have developed their independence as learners and can work collaboratively without the direct focus of the teacher. And children who are working in the teacher focus group receive immediate and relevant feedback, which they can act upon with teacher support. And ultimately, what we have found is the gaps in learning are closing. So we are really excited about September as we believe we have an inclusive, diverse and engaging curriculum. And that curriculum has been designed and developed with staff, pupil, parent and governors input. We sent out Google Forms to parents, to governors. We've done research with the children and staff have also had the input. So it really is very much a community curriculum that's been designed for Victoria by Victoria. And over the course of the next year, we will of course adapt and change our curriculum in response to area and international events, and rightly so. However, the one thing that will not change for us is our focus on high quality teaching and learning, which will ensure equity and excellence for all of our children. Thank you.
Thanks, Samantha.
Assistant Head Teacher.
Sorry, Caris. You paused for a second.
I'll pass over now to Becky Connor at Stanwell School. Diolch, Becky.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It's really wonderful to be here and talk about our curriculum. I should say I'm very passionate about it. I could talk to you for 3 hours. I won't, I promise. I will keep it to my allocated five minutes. I'm going to tell you the story of Stanwell's journey to Curriculum for Wales. It began with us being involved as a pioneer school, which meant that we were approaching all elements actually of national reform from an informed perspective. I have a wonderful job. My job is that I lead on learning, teaching, professional learning and Curriculum for Wales. And that means that for us, there is a real synergy between those three things. We started by really constructing a vision for what Curriculum for Wales was going to look like at Stanwell. And that was about making sure that we had researched, we understood, and we were coming at it from an informed perspective. We developed our approach to a professional inquiry, and that enabled us to make the decisions to inform our vision. And our vision transpired to be one that was very much about protecting subject specificity, not diluting our subjects. For us at Stanwell, we did not feel, following our inquiry-based work, that it was appropriate to amalgamate subjects into sort of thematic approaches. But what we did find, and this informed our vision, was that we had to make sure that our staff collaborated more. We had to make sure that we were making links in learning with and through the children within an AOLE, an area of learning, and across the whole school. We're a huge school, 2,000 children on roll, about 200 staff. And this is in 2016. You know, national reform was daunting at that point. So the vision was important. And then it's the dissemination of that vision and working with our staff to realise that vision. And so it became very clear to me early on that professional learning was going to be fundamental to realising any vision for Curriculum for Wales. And so 7 years ago, we did something quite brave. And we set up a professional learning system whereby our staff are released from their teaching commitments every Monday in cycles, in small groups. They attend, much like Sam Daniels had said, professional learning that is written by school for school to enable us to realise our vision. And the focus of that, well, there were three main focuses really. The first was an unfailing focus on pedagogy in learning and teaching, because as Sam Daniels said, that needed to be at the heart and that needed to drive our approach to curriculum change. And in order to do that, we felt that we needed to be inquiring all the time. We had to upskill our staff on their ability to inquire and evaluate and take risks and reflect on it. And the third thing was we needed to increase collaboration through coaching each other. So we needed to upskill our staff to be able to support each other through this process. And alongside that, it was about information giving. It was about reassuring our staff. It was about moving slowly and moving together with a shared direction of travel. And when national reform presents itself, and Natalie Gould showed you all those aspects that contribute to national reform, for teachers who are extremely busy working on the ground, that can be extremely scary, and it was. And so we had to use our professional learning to really reassure and to inform staff about where we're going and why we're going there. So our system was established. It took, a lot of investment in time, in strategy and organisation. It's been the most powerful thing that we have done to enable us to get to curriculum reform. We started with the 4 purposes. We unpicked what that meant, not tokenistically. What does that mean? What does it look like? What does it look like in science, in French, in maths, in music? We made sure that every member of staff had a profound understanding of what that looked like. We then thought about our subject. What is non-negotiable in our subject in terms of knowledge, skills and experience? What can we not afford to lose in the what we teach? We thought all the time about how we teach this. What is the diet that our children are getting in terms of pedagogy? What is the variety of approaches we're using to deliver schemes of learning? And the whole time we're doing this, we're operating in 2 worlds. We call it in Stanwell the old world and the new world, and how we sort of merge those together. And it was really, really important for me that our staff had this profound understanding that curriculum design is different to writing a scheme of work or complying with an exam spec, that curriculum design is everything that the child experiences, that curriculum design is about how we assess, how we teach, why we teach, what we teach, and why we teach this before that, why that must come to that. And we had some really keen staff who were ready. They wanted to write resources. They wanted to write lesson plans. And I was saying, stop, we're not doing that. We're not going there. This has to be about understanding. So we spent 5 or 6 years doing that. And only actually in the last 12 months have I said, right, we know about this now. We've got this. We can now start to put pen to paper or typing to screen, and we can start to design our curriculum because we have the knowledge, because our professional learning has enabled us to do that. So over the last 12 months, we have put together what our curriculum for Year 7 will look like. For the first time in 21 years, actually, in a huge school, we've designed that all in one place using a collaborative curriculum planner, a doc, a Google Doc. And we've totally changed the way we plan. I don't want a list of activities. What I want is the rationale. Why? Why this? Why now? How are you doing it? We've really focused on making the implicit explicit to our children, to our staff. Let's look at those cross-cutting themes, the mandatory elements of the curriculum. Let's look at how representative and how inclusive our curriculum is. We're not going to leave that to certain subjects or health and well-being AOLE. Let's bring that diversity and that representation in wherever we can. And so we have now just drafted and created the resources for the launch of our curriculum in September. And it did make me smile when Natalie said, it's not done forever. And that's interesting, message to get across to staff. This is not task and finish. This is round one. And it's been really important for us that we build into our professional learning opportunities and time, strategic time to evaluate, reflect, change, tweak, but also to design then our curriculum for Year 8. And so for a school leader in a large school, that's been the biggest challenge, but also the most exciting thing, is creating those opportunities for staff to collaborate, creating those professional learning opportunities for staff to be able to realise our vision. And when you put creative teachers in a room and they feel informed and they feel empowered, honestly, it sounds cheesy, but magic happens. And we're now in a place where we're ready to go, and we're ready to evaluate, and we're ready to tweak. So we will start with our curriculum for Year 7 in September. We, just like Sam Daniels, have curriculum consultants, 47 of them in school who've been appointed. And again, they are, like Sam said, a powerful group. They've been in the curriculum. They're now in with me and the learning and teaching team, auditing the provision, checking that there's coverage of all the mandatory elements. And it's a really, really exciting journey. We've looked at assessment as we've designed our curriculum. You can't separate the two, but that is really our next step. We know we've got work to do in refining that assessment. Our curriculum is progressive. We've planned it, thinking about what comes first and why, what comes next, and how we do that in terms of subject specificity, but also skills. And now what we need to do is try out and test our assessment methodologies, and think about how we're tracking and recording that, and have the confidence really to try new things with assessment, but not lose the rigor of it. And that's the challenge at the moment for us, and one that we're working through and we're enjoying looking at the moment. So it's very exciting, but for me, it's a lot of P's: pioneer involvement, professional learning, pedagogy, 4 core purposes, planning, and positivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. And Sam is going to be the next section now. Sorry, I can hear lots of feedback. Next section, Sam and Becky are going to make reference to the collaboration work. I'm not sure who's going first. It's just a brief session, just to bring everything to the close. Diolch yn fawr.
Shall I go first, Sam?
Yeah, I think you're first, and then I'll do the cluster inset day.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've worked collaboratively for many, many years. We've got a really good relationship with our feeders. Again, it's really hard sometimes to find the time to sit down and really give it what we need to give it. But we've managed to do that. We managed to do it all the way through school closure periods and everything. The spirit of the curriculum, as Sam has so expertly outlined, and I hope I have as well, is that each school writes a curriculum for their school. And so we took the decision quite early on with all the head teachers and all the leaders on curriculum change that we weren't going to write one curriculum for a cluster. Each school was going to write their own curriculums. What we were going to do, though, was understand what everybody was doing and collaborate and get some sense of continuity in terms of understanding what progression looks like. But we were very aware that that meant that, say, our 6 feeders could be doing slightly different things in terms of knowledge, skills and experience, but the progressive model would look the same and the approach to pedagogy would be understood by all. So we started by sort of meeting together online, much like this, with a collaborative doc. And the first thing was, right, in its infancy, tell us what you're thinking your curriculum is going to look like initially in terms of knowledge, skills, experience. And from that, we could plot that actually, even though we'd had this sort of free approach, there were lots of similarities in terms of what people were covering. Naturally so, there are subject specialists planning a progressive curriculum. So there were very similar approaches at certain times of the year. There were even some similar texts that were being explored in LLC. And we were able to start making those links and collaborating across the cluster. Our work there is not finished. I would be, misleading you if I said that's all totally done. What we started with was year 6 and year 7, and now as we move into next academic year, we've got time protected to look at 5 and 8 and to then pick up with 6 and 7 and tweak it and collaborate a little bit further. So it's been really exciting working with colleagues across the cluster. I can't speak for primary colleagues, but what I can say is they've often come to us and asked us for subject-specific expertise, and we've often gone to them and asked them for sort of approaches to pedagogy and how we link these things. They teach the same children in a class and they're linking subjects all the time. So our expertise in different phases, I think, has helped us both design a curriculum that will be fit for purpose. Thanks, Sam.
Sam, sorry, you're on mute.
I got it. It's okay. Okay, so I think the most difficult part of the collaboration was finding an area to work on that would benefit all schools, because as Becky has said in hers, we're all very, very busy, and trying to find extra time when you're focusing so much on a massive change for us all to then find time to work with other colleagues, it has to be made a priority. And that was what we all decided, that we would make the effort to make sure that we release the staff to be able to attend those AOLE teams. But because as a result of lockdown, we had not been able to meet as often as we probably wanted to. And being the types of schools that we are in the Penarth cluster, we'd all forged ahead with our implementation. We're all very passionate about it, as I'm sure you've picked up. But the difficulty then was we're going to have a whole cluster inset. It needs to be worthwhile. It needs to be something that meets the needs of all of the schools from all their different starting places. And the key to that was actual careful planning and preparation prior to our whole school cluster inset day. So we worked with Clarissa at CSC, who really helped us to focus on the needs of the cluster and the most beneficial content of the day. And I think probably the most important part is that every school, both our secondary schools as well, sent staff. So every school was represented, all school were involved, and teachers across these schools worked in their AOLE teams, facilitated by the CSE leads. And that was really, really useful because it ensured consistency and made sure that we were all on the same track. And it really worked, because at the end of it, all of the staff and my staff, we all met in our own schools at the end. And my staff said to me, gosh, it's really become clear now, all the different things that we've been doing, we've brought together because we understand the difference between progression and assessment. We understand that actually, even though we're doing our own curriculum, there have to be non-negotiables. There have to be non-negotiables that link all of us together as a cluster, so that we know that our children, regardless of which school they're in, are having the right diet, the right experiences, the right learning and skills to take them on into the next part of their journey. So as a cluster now, we've written an action plan straight away. In fact, that evening, Sue and I wrote an action plan for the cluster, and we have a definite way forward. And most importantly, I suppose, is our desire to work together to support each other, which is always really strong in the Penarth cluster. And as Becky alluded as well, this really is just the beginning for the Penarth cluster. I have no doubt as we go through the year, we will meet many, many times and we will adapt and change the work that we've already done. But it's about having that time, that all-important time to reflect on what's been done and leave the space for all colleagues to be able to move ourselves forward. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Samantha and Rebecca. Really interesting and good to have an insight into what you're doing with the curriculum. So I'm just going to open it up now to questions from the councillors. So if anyone's got a question, wave at me or put the hand up on Teams. I saw Naomi first and then Russell and Godfrey. So Naomi, take it away.
Hi guys. Yeah, so I was a teacher for a long time, and I remember, I haven't done for the last 5 years or so, and throughout my career, I vividly remember, curriculum's changing from one to the next, and as much as you can understand the reasoning behind it and you can fully believe in what you're doing, what a new curriculum and the reasons why, and particularly with this new curriculum, which I think is actually brilliant, and particularly with the sort of the new health and wellbeing AOLE, is obviously just going to massively improve children's time in school. I was just wondering, I loved that you sort of made sure that teachers had time out of class, because we know the pressures and the time pressures that particularly class teachers have. How were you able to fund that, and was that in addition to their regular PPA?
Shall I come in there?
Is that okay? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. The first when we initially did it, it was a big investment, and we took a hit because we did it 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and that my head at the time was obviously wanting that to be highly evidenced and getting value for money. We found that it was, so we would have continued anyway. But then the professional learning grant came from Welsh Government. Now, for a large school like us, that's a substantial amount of money. We made very sure, myself and my head teacher, that that was protected and used for exactly what it was intended for. And that's how we funded all of our professional learning. That's how we funded our supply costs to cover any cover that was required and any resources as well. We've got to the point now where actually teachers see the value in it so much that out of volition, they will cover for each other, which has reduced our supply costs even more. And that's just testament to it, really. That wouldn't have happened 6 years ago. That's after a process of them seeing the benefit of it.
And do you think because of that sort of been able to be given to... Oh, I'm so sorry, Natalie, go on.
I was just going to add in that we do as well give all schools collaboration funding through a grant system through CSE. So that's additional to professional learning grants. So it's about £6,000 per school plus £100 per full-time equivalent teacher as a base rate. But last year, any additional monies that come in from Welsh Government, we transport straight back out to schools. So our largest schools last year had in excess of 40,000-50,000 to support that as well. Our smallest schools had 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 to support that as well. So sorry, Becky, and sorry, Naomi, to butt in, but there are sort of two pots of money that support schools in that, the professional learning grant and the collaboration grant.
And it's
I vividly remember the new early years curriculum. This was back when I taught in London and spending many of an evening with colleagues trying to figure it out and work. So I thought that was brilliant, really, just to hear how you've been able to use that grant to make sure that teachers have time to actually do it and do it properly. And actually then it means that they're going to be more on board with that change than they probably would be without that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Naomi. So Councillor Godfrey next.
Hi, very interesting presentation. Previously been a parent governor myself, and obviously lived in the area all my life, and Stanwell, as long as I can remember, has always had a very good reputation anyway. So, for many years, I don't think you've done much wrong in Stanwell. I'd be interested to know what the reaction was to teachers, because I've had friends whose children have gone there, and they've always spoke very highly of the school and what the performance of the children and what they've got out of it. And whilst I appreciate we do have to have change and move forward, what has been the reaction of the staff? Because to my mind, I say particularly Stanwell there, they appear to have done a very good job over a sustained period of time. So, as I say, we do need to have change. But has it been really reciprocated that well? And as they sort of felt a little bit undervalued because they're being challenged on when they've already done a good job?
It's a really good question. I think we have always had sustained success in terms of outcomes, and sometimes when you're in a good place, you know, why change it? If it's not broken, you know, don't fix it. But actually, the result of our success over a sustained period of time is that even before national reform, we never sit still. So you might not see change advertised as widely as with national reform, but we've never ever stopped reflecting on our approaches to pedagogy. We've never stopped using this sort of self-improving school. And so for our staff, they're quite used to moving, they're quite used to change. Not at this level, I will grant you that, but that was why the time was so important. And I think it was in the construction of the professional learning and how you work with and through staff, how you move them with you, that was the powerful thing. If we just launched it and we hadn't constructed that very, very carefully, you know, we could have hit that challenge. As it happens, our staff have been totally on board, and I am incredibly proud of the way they've moved with this. In a time of real adversity, actually, it's been really difficult for the teaching profession, but we have kept moving, and staff really, really see it. They see it happening. They see the benefits of it. We're inquiring all the time, and they've really enjoyed that additional collaboration. We inquire on everything we do, so our staff feedback informs our next step, and it's been 98% positive in terms of moving towards change. And whilst I've still got the mic, I'm so sorry, Natalie, I didn't mention your CSE funding. You're absolutely right. We're very grateful for that, and we couldn't do it without it. And neither could we do it, actually, in answer to your question, without our support from CSE. So at Stanwell, we work very, very closely with CSE, I think for many, many, many years. And having my foot in that door has really helped me lead on this in school from a really informed place. And colleagues at CSE have been invaluable in shaping that. So thank you.
I'm going to give just a slightly different perspective, because yeah, I absolutely agree that, you know, I think one of the main points of why it's been so successful is because it wasn't done overnight. The curriculum for Wales is quite unique, and this has been done over a long period of time, and we've been drip fed. Now, as a teaching profession, we're very used to give it to me, I want to start it, I want to do it now. If it works, give it to me, and I need to start today. And that was a real battle with staff to start with, because I constantly had to support what we were doing and saying, you know, we're going to take our time because we're going to get it right. But often they would say, well, I don't understand, but they just don't tell us what to do. And that was the biggest battle that we had. I think nearly every head teacher I've spoken to has said the same. Their staff are just saying, why can't they just give it to us? But now we've become through the process, we now know why they didn't just give it to us, because actually this is a curriculum that has been made for our children, and gosh, the curriculum needed to change. And if you look at the 4 purposes, even if you don't look like what every school is doing, if you look at those 4 purposes, you know that this is what we want for our children in our future. We all feel absolutely passionate that those 4 purposes is everything we want for a society. And so by actually developing and designing a curriculum, slowly but surely reacting and responding to what's happening in the world as well, means that our children are engaged. They're not there sat there being dictated at or taught to. What they're not doing is they're actively involved in their learning, and you can physically feel it as you walk into the school. As you walk through the door, you can see the children excited about their learning, talking about what they want to do next. I don't think I've ever experienced that before in all my years of teaching. So to me, yes, things have been going well. Again, like Stanwell, we're a school that has always had a history of doing very well, but you wouldn't have felt walking into a school what you feel now, I don't think.
Thank you. Councillor Goodjohn.
Hello, thank you for that. I'd like to congratulate you on your progress, and it's very exciting to see such passion and enthusiasm happening. I was listening to you, and I believe a lot of it is in self-empowerment of both the staff, yourself as leaders, and the pupils. Seem like you're all very empowered, and that's really lovely to hear. I was wondering, because I was hearing about the children's feedback on the online in the past, and I was just wondering if you were getting feedback from the pupils themselves, and what they were saying.
Shall I go back? Okay. So our children, as young as they are, have an incredibly strong voice in the school, and we've actually done pupil curriculum task group even before the introduction of the curriculum for Wales. So it's a regular thing that we meet. They meet with myself every couple of weeks, and we talk about what is happening in their learning, what they would like to see change, what they would like to keep the same. And so the MAID, and they actually use the term MAID when they come to see me. So you see children as young as 7 with their MAID forms, writing down what they actually feel is working in the curriculum and what isn't, even to the point that they've said to me, we used to do a pen license, actually, something simple as this, and they said, get rid of the pen license. Who do you think self-esteem you are working on when you have a pen license? So the pen license is gone. So they can actually see that when they're asking for things, sometimes we have to give them reasons why we don't change things. But generally, they are so positive, because one of the first things we did, like I said in the presentation, was after the blended learning, we asked them what would work well for them. Because we knew, because of that level of engagement, there had to be something that was working well. And they were really clear. And in fact, we called the flexibility of timetable. It was after one of my pupils called Zavi. So it's called the Zavi effect. So everyone now calls it in school as the Zavi effect, which means we have a more flexible timetable. So the children are even called, whatever they come up with an idea is called after them. So they very much see that their ideas and processes are part of what we do.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, I've just got a question to ask about the changes in qualifications, and obviously with the curriculum changing, and what your assessment is of these changing qualifications and how that will affect the kids.
Do you want me to come in there, and then maybe Becky? So there is a reform of qualifications going on alongside the curriculum. Obviously, that is being led by Qualifications Wales, and there has been a work across a number of years already, and work ongoing, and a huge consultation as part of that. Obviously, that doesn't come into implementation until our current year 10s hit rollout, which is a few years yet, and then qualifications there. But yes, there's a qualifications reform going on alongside that. You heard a little bit in both the presentations about school-based assessment, so not, exams and formal qualifications, but there is more flexibility and planning at a school level on assessment and how that looks, and it has to be planned alongside that curriculum, because ultimately if schools are planning slightly different curricula to meet the needs of their pupils, they need to assess against that curricula, i.e. children are making progress along what has been planned in their school. So there's a big piece of work as part of curriculum reform for both qualifications and internal assessment within schools.
And if I just come in there sort of, from a school perspective, we've had reassurances all the way, as Natalie said, that it will reflect the ideologies of the curriculum and what we're planning to do. We do have to acknowledge that is a little bit of a challenge, that we haven't quite seen that yet. I think it's important to acknowledge that we're moving forward in good faith at the moment, but we're also moving forward in a very measured way in terms of assessment. So we're making sure that progression is at the heart of what we do, and we're making sure that we explore a variety of assessment methods with our children that will equip them for whatever that might look like in terms of flexibility. So we're making sure that we have sort of more new and innovative approaches, but that we haven't quite lost our traditional approaches at the same time. We have to be measured, because we don't have that information just yet.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Last chance for any more questions? No. Well, thank you to Samantha and Rebecca for coming and talking to us. I think I can speak on behalf of everyone saying we really appreciate your time and answering the questions and giving us a really thorough explanation of everything. So I think we can let you go now, and thanks for coming to see us.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Great. So we'll move on to Agenda item 5 now, the annual corporate safeguarding report 2021-22, which has come from Cabinet on 9th of June 2022.
Chairman, if I may, sorry to interrupt, can I just confirm that the committee are happy to obviously thank guests for their thorough presentation, and also then to note the content?
Yes, sorry. So happy to note on proposed. Would anyone like to second?
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. So moving on to agenda item 5, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is me this evening. It's normally Jason Redrup, our safeguarding officer, but he's actually carrying out safeguarding training with governors this evening, so he was unable to make it. Yeah, I'm not sure. I better introduce myself because obviously there's lots of new faces. So just David Davis. I'm head of additional learning needs and well-being. So good evening, everybody. So this, as you said, this is a report that went to Cabinet on the 9th of June. And what it does is it provides a report, which is a holistic report really across the whole of the council as to the safeguarding activities. So then this report then goes to all scrutiny committees, and the purpose then is for people like myself to focus on the actual content in relation to the specific elements that applies to this committee, which is the learning and skills element. So as you will see, the key information is in Appendix 1 of the report, and that is then split into a number of sections. The section that relates to learning and skills is section B. I won't go through that verbatim by any means, but I will just pull the key elements out of it, and then give an opportunity, obviously, for people to ask any questions on what is a really key area within everybody's lives, really. So just to say that there's a huge amount of work that's going on, across the council and certainly across this directorate in relation to safeguarding. And this is in line with requirements of national, regional, and local developments. It's very much uppermost in the thoughts of the directorate, and we, in our monthly directorate management team meetings, safeguarding is a standing item, and one in which we focus on all key areas of safeguarding, but in particular safe recruitment, training, allegations against employees and volunteers. These are all really keenly focused upon in our meetings. One of the things that we emphasise is the need for support and guidance to schools and all our educational settings and settings that come under the directorate. We provide a model safeguarding policy to all schools, which really enables schools to have assurance that they have focus on the key elements, but we also obviously encourage schools to make it their own and to adapt it into their own context. And then we ask schools to adopt those policies. And obviously we review those on an annual basis and take into account any changes to legislation or some safeguarding hot topics that often appear. So we have a mandatory annual safeguarding training, which is delivered across the directorate, and that's in line with the requirements as set by the Cardiff and Vale Regional Safeguarding Board, and all employees are expected to comply with that training. There's training of different levels, obviously, depending on the roles that are undertaken by professionals. So level 1 training is training that we expect all professionals or all people working within education settings to undertake. And then there's level 2 training, where these are specifically aimed at those who have a more hands-on role, and that's the dedicated safeguarding person and the deputy designated safeguarding person within a school. So We also expect all directorate staff to do this, and we have a similar model actually. So where there's a designated senior person in the school and a deputy, we also have that within our Learning and Skills Directorate in all the different teams. So we expect we are slightly out of line with some local authorities, with our neighbouring local authorities, in that we expect mandatory training to be undertaken every year now, whereas it's 2 years in many cases, and 2 years is very much acceptable. However, we just feel that a year, because things can change quite quickly with safeguarding, that we prefer to have it as annual training. The compliance rates with that training are excellent, and there's some compliance rates there. And if I can assure you, because some of the lowest compliance rate there was 20 out of 25 in terms of compliance for staff, which is 80%. That's compliance at a moment in time. For extended periods, and many of those, certainly in schools, who are non-compliant because they haven't been able to access the training because they're on long-term sick, or there is some extenuating reason for that. We have extended the expectations around training to designated safeguarding governors and to the governing bodies in general. We cannot make it mandatory for governors, chairs of governors, or any governors to undertake this training. But I suppose in relation to the designated safeguarding governor, what would we say? Rather than it being mandatory, there's a high expectation that that would be the case, and it would be unusual if it wasn't the case. You know, I'm very pleased to say that, you know, we're rolling out this training, and the majority of designated safeguarding governors have now had the training, and there is no indication that those who haven't are not going to sign up to the training as it's going through. And then equally, you know, there are two twice termly training for all governors, and the numbers who are undertaking that training is increasing, and I think we're well over 50 now, and there's 18 this evening, I know, on the training that Jason is delivering. So all very positive, I think, in terms of ensuring that there are enough people in schools who are aware of the need to really be vigilant around these issues, and about creating a team in a school, and that governors can, you know, work with the leadership teams in schools to make sure that the schools are safe. So we also do a lot of work in relation to children in employment or entertainment. There are licensing laws around them and around their chaperones, and we have to vet chaperones, and that can be quite a number in the Vale, as there has often been you know, big programs where there's you know, production companies who are wanting young people to work there, and that you know, they need to be safeguarded. You know, the safeguarding officer, Jason predominantly, and myself, I sit on the regional safeguarding board, but there are a number of subgroups which we play an active role in. There is the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference, MARAC, which is a really important conference, a really important body, because that looks at the impact of domestic violence on young people, and there are weekly meetings whereby if that are led by the police, and if there are incidents in the home that they think that may have impacted on young people, then schools, there are daily meetings and schools are asked to report on these young people, and schools are also told about this in relation to young people, in order to ensure that these young people are treated, watchfully and appropriately, given the possible difficulties that they've been facing. Also, we continue to have a role in monitoring physical intervention training and the use of physical intervention in schools, developing a new policy now around that in schools, and again, an agenda that is constantly changing around that. We also play, a key role in working with schools around bullying and incidents of harassment, and we produce a policy for schools on that. And recently, a lot of work has started around the very worrying reports and thematic review that Estin carried out around peer-on-peer sexual harassment in schools, which you will be aware of, which is the subheading of that is "We don't tell our teachers." And I think the key issue that came out of that was that peer-on-peer sexual harassment was endemic in schools, probably as it is a reflection of society, and that it was so endemic and so entrenched that young people didn't even bother to report that, because it had just become parcel of what life was about. Now, obviously, that is horrendously concerning, and there is a lot of work that we are undertaking around that. We started that process, and that will be an ongoing process into the future. I think, Chair, that probably is a run through of the key points, and I'll just leave it open now for people to ask any questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, David. Open it up. Are any councillors like to ask a question? Got a few. I saw Councillor Goodjohn first.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was just wondering, safeguarding, you're talking about if isolation was also included in that, because I personally find that is not a good thing. Well, I'll start with that one anyway.
I suppose the quick answer is yes, it is included in that, and it is seen as part of the same sort of physical intervention. Isolation is in the same policy, isolation has been it's not as big as an issue as it was at one point, because there were all sorts of there were some very high-profile cases, probably about 10 years ago, Councillor Goodjohn, around the use of isolation and actually locking people into isolation. Those practices, I'm glad to say, are well, fingers crossed in terms of what you can see in the past, but it is probably about the overuse of withdrawal, you know, there's a continuum, isn't there, of isolation, and we're very aware of that, and do work with schools around that, and we certainly have teams working with schools and picking up on those sorts of issues.
Oh, it's really reassuring to hear. I was also wondering what things you are actually doing to combat the don't tell your teachers. Is there going to be more? Is there more? I'm sure there's more awareness brought to the children about what is acceptable, but also is there more supervision during recreational time to help combat this?
We have so the Essendon produced a thematic review, and there were recommendations for schools in that thematic review. So what we are doing is, at the moment we have asked schools to report where they are at in terms of progress against those recommendations. I also presented on that report in head teacher meetings, and I think it is hitting home what the issues are. I think I was talking to some colleagues earlier today, actually, and the school had carried out a survey of the young people, and they had actually said that this was an issue, which made them think, wow, it is an issue, because there's always this temptation, even in reports, to think, well, that's somebody else. It's not us, even though they're saying that, you know, this is a problem throughout Wales. Well, yeah, it must be somewhere else, but it isn't with us. So, you know, we're working with schools around, I think it's cultural shift, if I'm honest, councillor, and having a zero tolerance of just these idle comments and you know, misogynistic behaviour, which is, you know, sometimes just seen as part and parcel of the, you know, and please, these aren't my thoughts, but you know, they are seen as in society really as acceptable and part of, you know, rough and tumble of, you know, just the boys being the boys. Well, it isn't, you know, and it needs to be pulled up, and certainly one of our schools is doing that very well, and I think we've got work to do. I think there's a long road, to be honest. I would be lying if I said to you that, yeah, that, you know, everybody's on top of this and it's going to change tomorrow. We certainly have a lot of work to do, and it's not just around sexual harassment in relation to males on females. There are all sorts of you know, issues around all sorts of vulnerable groups in relation to this. So yeah, a crucial area of work.
Thank you, that's really insightful. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Birch.
Thank you. I'd like to start by commending the department for all of the work that they're doing here. I mean, it's good to see that there are so many training opportunities with the emphasis on safeguarding, because as we know, it's building a team approach, because everyone has the same information at the same time, and then they're able to discuss it rather than hearing it in isolation and it probably not having the same effect. And you don't have staff there, if you're a non-teaching governor, to be able to talk about the implications of that in everyday school life. I thought it was interesting you were talking about Marek. I have in fact been part of some of these conversations in the past, because I think it's so important that children are seen by staff in the context of the backgrounds that they come from. I mean, we assume that children turn up every day as clean slates. Sorry, I got a cough. Clean slates, and in fact they are the product of their environment. And I think that, you know, it's yet another disadvantage that some children suffer from. And, you know, that the staff should be aware and be able to treat children more sympathetically, because some of them are seeing home lives that we wouldn't wish on a dog, but they still turn up to school every day. And also the peer-on-peer sexual harassment thing, it is depressing, isn't it, when we find out the statistics of how many children have seen pornography before they're 11, how many children think it's quite normal to send each other pictures of parts of their bodies and so forth, because that's just chat, you know. What's the word? I can't think of the word. Banter. I hate that expression. It covers a multitude of sins, and it covers all sorts of things that we as adults regard as completely unacceptable, but children are supposed to accept that this is just part of their everyday life, as you said. And I think it'll be interesting to see how children can be brought to see that this is not acceptable behaviour. You know, if anyone they didn't know asked them to do it, no, that's not entirely true, that they are not going to, they're not susceptible to that kind of behaviour from other people. I'm not even going to say other children, because some frequently it's adults purporting to be children, and it's so depressing to see that kind of sexualization of children. Some of it's sexual, obviously, some of it is just out and out bullying, isn't it? Particularly the emphasis on vulnerable groups. So I'd be interested to see not which school, but how the school that is tackling it is doing it and how successful it is, and whether or not we could see a case study of what they've done. I mean, even if they reduced it by 10%, that is still a major achievement. I think the only thing you could do is probably confiscate all phones and drop them off Penarth Pier, but that's not going to happen, is it? Children are texting each other at 3 o'clock in the morning and making rude comments to each other. So, yeah, I haven't got an answer for that one. Anyway, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. I can see Councillor Norman's got a hand up, but just is it okay if I just say one other thing,
Yeah.
Chair? Because it links to that, and I should have said there's a lot of work going on. There's a regional strategy around violence against women, domestic abuse, and sexual violence. You know, VAUDA SV is term, and you know, again, this is mandatory training for. Well, it's certainly all. In my world, it's all people working within education, but I think I think across all of Wales, it's pretty much in all work settings, again at different levels. But again, something which is very prevalent within our society, worryingly so, and again something which has serious impact on the lives of young people living in those family circumstances, as well as the adults that are involved. So I should have said that as part of our important work that's going on as well.
Thank you. Councillor Norman.
No, thank you, and thank you very much for the very detailed report. It's excuse me. It's just to reiterate actually what the two previous questions were. I, for one, have young grandchildren, teenage grandchildren, and to think that they may be putting this position is very, very worrying. As Councillor Burgess said, it would be interesting to see what steps are being taken by the school that you say is getting good results on this. We need to stamp this out, and I think we've got to start right at the grassroots in the junior schools and educate children right at the, I'd say at the beginning. Unfortunately, we don't have any control over their home background, so we don't know how much of that is influencing these acts. But I think if we can start at young children to respect each other for whatever their gender or colour or what have you, this needs to be done. And I think it'd be very interesting to know what steps are being taken at the moment, because this is a very, very worrying topic. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Godfrey.
Okay. Hi.
You're on mute, Russell.
No. Hello, is that better?
There you go, we can hear you.
Yeah, I listened to the two previous councillors and I take on board their concerns, what they're saying. But I would like to say that bullying in schools and generally children growing up has gone on since before I was a child. And from my experience in school, and also being a school governor for over 7 years, and now chair of a local play group, I've always witnessed that teachers have actively done the best they can within the guidelines and tried to do what they can with regards to stop bullying and to educate children with regards to how they should act and shouldn't act. But they've got a very tough job. When you're starting to ask for stats, I think that's very unfair, because most of this bullying and most of what goes on with mobile phones is hidden from adults and hidden from teachers. So to try and quantify that and say a school's doing there, and I think it's a bit unrealistic. All you can do and continue to do, which happened in my time in school and I experienced as a school governor, is for the teachers to do the best they can to identify if there's issues and to try and educate the children. But I think it's a bit of an unfair ask to ask them to do anything over and above that, in my opinion. Thank you.
Would you like to comment on that, David?
It's always getting a balance, isn't it? And you do recognize completely that the role of the teacher in the school is a very complex one. But I do think we have, and I'm sure you would agree, Councillor Godfrey, that there is obviously a deep responsibility that we all have to make sure that all young people in school have a safe experience. And all the data would suggest that, there are certain groups within our society where that is very much not the case. So, whether that's to do with body size, with sexuality, with gender, with disability, and yes, we can only do what we can, but I think there is an onus on us to raise awareness of these issues, and when they are clearly detrimental to certain groups, and we can see the impact on their mental health as they grow up, we've got a responsibility to do something about it. And we need to do that in a sensible way, but we have to take that responsibility.
Thanks, David. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't my report, so I'd be delighted to speak with committee's permission, if that's possible. So I can't see any of the committee objecting. I just wanted to come in on that. I think there's a couple of things that we need to bear in mind in relation to the whole thing of, well, it never did me any harm. It is a huge issue. It's a huge issue in terms of life experiences of children, of exactly what happens to them in their adult life. I think it might be useful for committee to hear about the trauma-informed practice that's been adopted by schools throughout the Vale, so that they can gain understanding of what we're trying to do in schools, so children don't carry those experiences with them for the rest of their life. Rhiannon can speak for herself, but has been to a lunch at Sculladerry today, which was made by a group of young people that suffer from severe anxiety. Some of that comes down to the experiences that they have had through their earlier life. And then we're going to go into a budget setting. And I mean, for me, I tend to look at the impact on our young people, but we're about to start budget setting for next year. Summer recess will be taken up with meetings, actually looking at the size of the hole we've got to try and fill on that. And with that, you can start looking at some of the costs, the financial costs of trying to support these young people to go forward successfully in future lives. I don't doubt that our teachers aren't doing an absolutely phenomenal job, but I'm not prepared to put bullying or any sort of abuse that is experienced by any of our children into the too difficult box. This is something that as a council, as a scrutiny committee and as individuals, because we are all responsible as corporate parents, that we cannot ignore. And I'm sure that, you know, I've probably taken it that it's what Councillor Godfrey said too seriously, but it is something I feel passionately about, because in all my time as a councillor, I have met young people every single year who have been damaged quite severely on occasion by the type of issues that we're hearing about this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Burnett. I appreciate the comment. I'm aware time is pressing on, and I don't want to keep people here all night. So if we can move on, sorry to Rhiannon and Russell, but I think everyone's had their say on this one.
Chair, Chair, I would just like to come back on what Councillor Burnett said.
I understand, Russell. I think
no, but I took exception to a point that she's made, which she's totally got wrong. I certainly wasn't alluding to the fact that it's something it's always been there. So there we are. The point I was making is that bullying has been there forever and a day. And my experience as a school governor for over 7 years and as a pupil in school, I always felt that the teachers have always done their very best to eradicate it and to educate children and to put people right. I wasn't trying to in any way devalue the seriousness of the situation, but I was just pointing out that you can't be too unfair on teachers. From my experience in 60 years, I've always felt the teachers have always done their level best. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Russell. Everyone's had their say now, so we'll move on. Thanks, David, for speaking to us. I think it's a lot of that. It makes a very sobering reading. So, but I know it's something we all take an interest in. So thank you for that. So I move that we note the report. Do we have a seconder for that? Nick Hodges, the thumbs up. Brilliant. Thanks for that. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 6 now. So the consultation on the proposal to transfer specialist resource base at Landock to Ysgol
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody. My name is Lisa Lewis, and I'm the Operational Manager for Strategy and Resources within the Directorate. This report has been referred by Cabinet to ensure that the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee is consulted on the proposal as part of the statutory consultation process. As a bit of background, I can advise that the current CRB provision, both staff and pupils at Landock Primary School moved to Ysgol in Llantwit Major during, I think it was just around about the second lockdown, on a temporary basis due to issues surrounding the pandemic, in order to ensure a safe learning environment could be maintained for pupils and staff. The pupils within the unit have speech, language and communication needs. The arrangement was temporary, with the intention that the base would return to Landock when COVID restrictions eased. Latterly, officers from Building Services have, however, surveyed the accommodation at Landock with a view to arrangement for the return. And they concluded that extensive remodelling would be required in order to provide a suitable space for the resource base going forward. As long as Landock is an older building, any remodelling could not create the same standard of environment that the children and the staff had been enjoying at Ysgol which is a newly built facility in Llantwit Major with all the benefits of a 21st century school. If the proposal were to go ahead, existing staff would be permanently located to Ysgol to support learners there within the CRB. The proposal would allow the CRB to continue to benefit from the facilities at the school where it is now and allow access to the best possible specialist provision. It would also allow for a more equitable distribution of specialist bases across the Vale of Glamorgan. The consultation with the prescribed consultees is open until the 8th of September and will be available via the website. A consultation document was found at Appendix A within the report, and that provides a comprehensive overview of the proposal, outlining any potential implications, both positive and negative. That concludes my brief summary of the report. However, with your permission, Chair, either myself or Dave Davis would be happy to take any questions as appropriate about the consultation.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Lisa. Open it up to councillors. Does anyone have any questions about this? Russell, is that a legacy hand or is that a new one?
It's a new one.
New one. Go ahead.
I'd just like to ask, obviously there's some difference between Llantwit Major and Llandoch. What has been the reaction to the parents of the pupils? Obviously, it's a much, you know, depending on where they live geographically, it could be a huge journey from differential sites.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the issue with our units is this is a Vale-wide unit, so children from across the whole geographical area of the Vale of Glamorgan can be referred to the unit. So whereas some children may live sort of Penarth, Cardiff area of the Vales, therefore Llandoch was more convenient, there would be children who lived Cowbridge, Llantwit Major Way, where Ysgol y Draig would be more convenient. When we looked at the implications in terms of transport, for example, what we noticed is the costs of transporting children were relatively equitable in terms of wherever the base was, which indicates realistically that although addresses will fluctuate and pupils will fluctuate, there is no real way of measuring conclusively that one site would be more appropriate from a transport and timing situation for pupils. In terms of staff, they're currently being transported to the Ysgol y Draig as part of the redeployment opportunities. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. Although Dave's got his hand up, I can see.
Yep, David.
Yeah, only to really support what Lisa's saying. But Councillor Godfrey, obviously that is the one issue I would say with the, you know, and you're right to pick that up. That is something that obviously we were considering, and it's a significant consideration, but Lisa's absolutely right. Wherever you put it, if you're having, you know, the Vale is quite wide geographically, unless you put everything in the centre, then there is always going to be somebody who has to travel further than somebody else. The one thing is this is a part-time provision, so you know, it won't be doing that travel all the time every day, but obviously there is an onus on us to make that travel time for people as small as possible, and there is undoubtedly a possibility if you took somebody who's having to travel from from as far one side of the Vale to the other, that's going to be a significant journey. But that would be the case if it was in Penarth for somebody living in Llantwit. So, you know, that's I suppose how we're looking at it. But it'll be interesting to see what the consultation brings on that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I can't see anyone else. Oh, Councillor Birch.
Thank you. No, I was just going to say that I welcome this because it is a much better central position for the whole of the Vale. I mean, obviously Llandoch is, you know, very close to me, but it's not so convenient for people at the other end. It'll be interesting to see how the travel costs pan out, though obviously they're not going to be predictable over the next few years. And I'm very pleased that the facility is going to be housed somewhere that's more modern, has got, you know, got better facilities. And Llandoch is a school that is in need of overhaul, repair, etc., which is something that's going to be looked at later. But it's probably, and also the space that it left in Llandoch is being taken up by their increased numbers on roll. So it's a win-win situation for everybody, I think.
David.
Yeah, absolutely. The key thing is the learning environment for the young people, and that is not to decry what they were getting at Llandoch, but clearly, you know, as Lisa said, this is a brand new 21st century school that they're in with all the facilities that they can access as a consequence. And it's really good that some of our young people who you know, have got additional learning needs can access that sort of provision.
Thanks, David. I just had a question myself, actually. It says that about the transport, it says consideration will be given for free school transport for ALM pupils living within the 2-mile limit on an individual basis. And I know there's the passenger transport team and so on. I was just wondering if there's a consistent criteria to decide these things.
Yes, that is covered by the ALN transport policy. It tends to revolve around accessibility and whether children could walk unaided to the site, for example, or whether they would find difficulty in doing that. So it's based on assessments. Our ALN team and transport teams work very closely on that when new children attend all of our units.
Great, thank you. Last chance for questions. Okay. Thank you, Lisa and David, for helping us out with that. Really, really useful and really important as well. So again, agenda item 6, I move to note. If anyone would like to second. Again, the Hodges thumb going up. That's all good.
Chair,
so,
if I may, with your permission, are you happy for me to put in the recommendation that the committee endorse the proposal?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item 7 now, revenue monitoring, April to May 2022.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name's Vicky and I'm one of the finance support managers in the accountancy section. So I'm going to take you through the revenue and the capital monitoring tonight. So it's covering the period the 1st of April to the 31st of May. And I just wanted to point out before I start that you might notice the report looks a bit different from last financial year. It used to be chopped up and you would only get the information relevant to your scrutiny committee. But now to give a broader and wider picture, we've included all the directorates within the report. But I'm only going to, when I'm chatting, I'm only going to chat about the remit of the Learning and Culture Committee. So first of all, to chat about revenue. The Learning and Skills budget is currently projected to break even following a transfer of reserves in relation to the Ysgol demountable. Obviously, it's still very early in the financial year at the moment. So there are some pressures within the additional learning needs service. At the moment, there may be a shortfall on the budgeted out of county income. And if necessary, we will be able to pick this up from an ALN reserve if required. There's also pressures around energy and school transport. But again, as it's so early in the financial year, we will have a clearer picture as the year goes on and bring more information to you then. So there was a revenue efficiency target of 68k identified for the directorate to find. 32k of this has been identified from savings against the historic pensions budget. But the balance is still to be identified. And again, as the year progresses, we will try to identify the remaining balance of that saving. So that's a snippet of the revenue report. Do you want me to go on to capital and then open up questions, Chair, or do you want to take it section by section?
I think that your first suggestion sounds fine, if that's right with Amy.
Okay, so moving on to capital. So again, we've included all the information from all the directorates, and we have slightly changed the layout of this report. So we've included a summary table now within the main body of the report, summarising the appendix basically, so detailing the budget, the spend and the slippage. And we've also included some sections. So we've got an additions environment section and then a slippage section, which is different to last year. So the current budget at the moment is 25.6 million. And of that, as at Q1, 608k has been spent. I know that doesn't sound like very much, but obviously the summer holidays is fast approaching. And obviously, as all the schools are shut during the summer holidays, that's the time when the vast majority of works are carried out on the schools. So we expect that to ramp up quite a lot over the summer months. So slippage is included in the budget figures in this report. So underspend from 21-22 has now been approved to be carried forward into 22-23, and that is reflected in the figures in this report. So I just wanted to highlight the report says 2 requests, apologies, but it's actually 3 because I've realised Penarth Pier Pavilion should be under the remit of this committee as well. So I just wanted to highlight that. So firstly, we're requesting to increase the capital programme for a scheme at Colcutt Primary School. They're having some paving done in their playground, and that's going to be funded by the school themselves. The council has also been awarded a grant from Welsh Government of 910,000. It's a community focused schools grant, and that's going to help us to safely and effectively open schools to the community outside of traditional hours. And then lastly, we've got the Penarth Pier Pavilion scheme. We're requesting to increase the programme by 35k for that scheme to implement some lighting, and that's going to be funded by a revenue contribution from the policy budget. So obviously, at the moment, it's a very difficult time to deliver these capital schemes with the current economic climate and inflation. Also, materials, the lead times on materials. I've never known it, to be honest with you. I know it's not under this scrutiny committee, but I've been told that vehicles are going to be a wait of 3 years. So obviously, there is potential for there to be slippage as we go along and move further into the financial year, but we will closely monitor that and bring you updates with our reports as required. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Yes, any questions? I think all the numbers have started on people, but
if anybody thinks of anything, I'm happy to take emails afterwards. That's no problem.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks. I'm always glad to see Penarth Pier Pavilion getting money spent on it, so I heartily approve of that. So if that's okay, thanks for that, Victoria. So Amy, can we note both of those together? Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you have separate reports this evening, so obviously you will have a separate set of recommendations for each report. Yeah. But we'll make sure that the revenue is noted, the points within the remit of this committee are noted, and same goes for your capital as per the recommendations that are in that report. Okay, brilliant. So can I have a seconder for? Lovely. Thanks, Nick. So moving on to agenda item 9. The summary of Eston inspections outcome for the spring term. Muted, Caris.
Sorry, I was muted, sorry.
It happens.
I'll be presented this paper in terms of the Eston inspection outcomes for the spring term for this academic year. Eston, as I'm sure you're aware, is the Education and Inspectorate Service for Wales. And back in March 2020, inspections were suspended due to COVID. So there hasn't been any inspections since then. But in a sense, in terms of the background, in terms of this paper, you will see that between October and December 2019, Eston had already started to conduct a consultation about the inspection arrangements and about their framework. And in a sense, they'd already started to revise the framework, but because of the suspension of inspections due to COVID, they hadn't been able to pilot that framework until this spring term. So during the autumn term 2021, schools were asked across Wales if they would like to put themselves forward for a pilot inspection. And in spring 2022, this academic year, schools across Wales were involved in that pilot, and we had 3 schools in the Vale involved. We had Llandoch Primary, Stanwell and Whitmore High. Also this term, and you'll see there's reference as well to Swallow Playgroup in St Athan. They were also inspected by Eston and Care Inspectorate Wales. So just to give you a bit of background about the inspections, as I mentioned, you've got 3 inspections in the Vale of Glamorgan, and you will see in Appendix 1 further detail about those inspections. There's a link to the actual report. You'll also see the recommendations for those schools, and if there's any information about interesting or innovative case study, you'll see that it's noted in the appendix as well. In terms of, just to give you a bit of background information about the actual week of inspection, 4 days for primary, 5 days for secondary. The team would look at things like sample of pupils' work. There'd be discussions with pupils, teachers, leaders, managers, the governors, parents as well. And there also would be a strong focus on observations of teaching. So you'll have observations of full lesson observations, or you would also have learning walks where inspectors would spend around 5-10 minutes in one classroom before moving on to another classroom. There'd also be pre-inspection questionnaires that would take place with pupils and with parents and staff. And they would also spend some time as well looking at key documentation, and there would also be a report written by the local authority and the consortium. In terms of the revised framework, Estyn has reduced the notice period that schools receive prior to an inspection, and it's gone down from 15 days to 10 days. But those of the schools that were involved in the pilot back in spring had an additional 5 days. So the ones that were inspected in the spring term had 15 days notice, but moving forward, Estyn has gone down to 10 days notice. That's in a sense to give less pressure for schools in terms of, you know, sort of, it's more intense, I'm not saying, but the idea is that it doesn't give time for schools to worry and to prepare too much, that they just go straight into the inspection. Another change you'll see referenced in 2.7 is the fact that there is no longer any summative grades awarded. In terms of the inspection areas, there's 5 areas: learning, well-being and attitudes to learning, teaching learning experiences, care support and guidance, and leadership and management. And previously, under, if I say the old framework, there would be an overall judgment awarded according to each inspection area. But under the new framework, that is no longer there. But what that does give schools is more information about strengths and areas for improvement. And and feedback from schools is that they appreciate, that feedback and identification of strengths and areas from improvement from Estyn. In terms of follow-up categories, there remains 3 follow-up categories, same as the previous framework. There's Estyn review, significant improvement, and special measures. In terms of the 3 schools that were inspected during the spring term, none of those schools are in any follow-up. And in terms of Estyn, they continue to identify interesting or innovative practice. And you will see in the report, in terms of Appendix 1, a reference to Stanwell and Whitmore, where both schools have been invited to write 2 case studies each in relation to their interesting or innovative practice. Once those have been published, we will draw your attention to them, but at the moment we're waiting for them to go through quality assurance processes with Estyn, but they will be published at a later date on the Estyn website. And then in terms of Swallow Playgroup, as I mentioned, it was also inspected during the spring term. You've got information in Appendix 2 in relation to the playgroup. And in terms of the areas and the themes considered in terms of this playgroup, you'll see there's 6 themes: well-being, learning, care and development, teaching and assessment, environment, and leadership and management. And in terms of follow-up activity, 2 different follow-up activities here in terms of progress review or focused improvement. But in terms of Swallow Playgroup, there was no follow-up activity at all. So that's just a brief overview in terms of the spring term inspections, but I'm happy to take any questions if anybody would like to ask anything. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Carys. Councillor Marshalsea.
Hi, yeah, I had a good read of the report, obviously. I was just really impressed, to be honest, with all of them, because there's very few recommendations, and the recommendations, in my eyes, seem quite minor. We are aware that there's been changes to push Welsh language, so that was going to be one that was obviously would come up as well. So, yeah, I was just quite impressed.
Thank you. Are there any others? I just wanted to ask something myself about, I know Eston is sort of moving away from the colour coding, which they've been using in terms of giving parents an idea of what school standards are. I just wondered what your sort of view of that was and how schools have reacted and what parents can expect in the future.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the colour coding, that was something that Welsh Government used primarily with regional consortia. And it was a regional consortia that would discuss with individual schools in terms of their level of support. And that was presented to the public in terms of the level of colours, as you mentioned, Councillor Thomas. So, you know, your more intensive, and it was in terms of level of support. So where there was green or yellow, there'd be less support awarded to a school, and then if a school was receiving amber or red support, that's where there would be more intense support. The colour categorisation, or sort of, was suspended back in March 2020 as well because of COVID. And what we have done in Central South Consortium is to move away and to have a new system where we've got schools receiving core support and enhanced support. So again, we're focusing on the needs of the school and making sure that all schools have access to the right level of support. And that's something that has been well received by schools, and something that will continue with the new evaluation arrangements that Welsh Government have published last month as well. To support parents with, moving forwards, schools will also, from September onwards, provide summary guidance on their websites that will provide a clear picture in terms of strengths and areas for improvement in terms of their self-evaluation findings. It will also provide parents with an overview of their key priorities in terms of school development plans, and also any external support provided to the schools to address those priorities. And I think in terms of a way forward, once they're actually schools, once they're implemented from September onwards, that will support parents in identifying, areas of strengths and areas for development for individual schools.
Thank you, Caris. I can't see any other hands, so thank you for that long presentation. And I move that we note the inspection outcomes. If I could have a seconder for that. Thanks, Naomi. So moving on to the final agenda item of the night. So agenda item 10, the annual delivery plan monitoring reports Q4 performance.
That's me, Chair.
Over to you, Paula.
So the performance report presents the position as at the end of Q4 for the 21-22 financial year. There's a presentation appended within the report that you have on your agenda, which gives an overview of the position, and that starts on page 163 of your 339. So it's a rather long report. So the presentation gives a breakdown of the RAG rating for each of the wellbeing objectives that are.
Oh, you're on mute, Paula.
I don't know how I did that. Sorry. It then goes out to goes on to set out the highlights in terms of what's been achieved over the last year against each of the objectives. And those achievements are achievements which fall within the remit of this scrutiny committee. A performance snapshot is provided on page 166. So that's slide 4 of the presentation. So of the planned activities that we had, 91% or 48 of 53 of them were given a green rating, and 5 or 9% were given a red rating. And 4 of those 5 didn't progress as planned due to COVID. And then of the 30 measures, 62% or 8 of those were given a green status, 1 was given an amber status, and again 4 were given a red status. And of those 4, again, COVID was a contributing factor to 3 of those. So the performance exceptions, the detail of those is provided in Appendix B of the report. So you'll be able to see which of the, the red RAG rated actions and measures clearly within that report, clearly within Appendix B. Slide 5 on page 167 sets out the areas for improvement and also areas for future focus. And, you know, a lot of these areas are actually ongoing work, so you would expect to see them being areas of future focus rather than saying we need to improve performance in those areas. And it then goes on to provide a coronavirus recovery update. And just to say about that, I mean, much of the coronavirus recovery work has sort of become embedded really in what we do day to day. So, you know, we'd expect to see activity coming out of coronavirus featuring in our next annual delivery plan in the future. So then you've got a very detailed appendix then which sets out the performance against all of the actions in all of the service plans across the council, not just learning and skills, and then performance against all of the targets under each objective. So that's also attached to the report. So I won't go into detail on the various appendices. It's far too much to go into that level of detail, but hopefully you have had opportunity to read through the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Paula. Any questions from councillors? Did anyone read 300 plus pages? Yeah, Naomi did. There we go. Thumbs up. Brilliant. I just something from me. One of the things, one of the red areas, but the adult Welsh learners target. I don't know how specifically we want to go into it, but it was just a general thing about Welsh language learning, I suppose. I mean, obviously you acknowledge that engagement's sort of low across Wales. I was just wondering what measures sort of generally that the council is taking in these areas to sort of try and increase Welsh language learning and maybe buck the trend, and if there's a sort of overall strategy the council has on that.
I can see a hand up there. I don't know. I thought that might be Trevor coming in to answer that, as that comes under his area of the service. But oh, there you are, Trevor. You've popped up.
I'm hidden away in the background. Yeah, there's a lot of work going on with our, not just Welsh learners, it's a lot of our adult and community learning programs, because as you would appreciate, we've had a lot of challenge retaining learners over the COVID period, and I think that loss of face-to-face teaching for a lot of them, you know, it didn't help when things started to return back to normal, as it were. So we've been doing a lot of recruitment drives isn't the right term, but actively trying to recruit those learners back into the programs. We're offering some diversity now in terms of how we take those programs going forward. So there is some online learning that's remaining as well for those who are finding that really suitable, which is good news. And you know, we are looking to spread out how we take adult and community learning in terms of a whole family approach. So greater integration into, you know, primary and secondary education, because one of the things we've done through our Welsh and Education Strategic Plan is to make sure that we generate a lot of demand for Welsh language education, and that includes our adult learners, and support for families who are looking to put their kids into Welsh medium education, but are uncertain about how they're going to support that at home. So taking that forward with our 21st Century Schools program and incorporating some of those learning opportunities, hopefully to widen the field to get some more folks into those, I have to say it, nationally award-winning programs. So yeah.
Good plug. Thank you, Trevor. Councillor Goodjohn is next.
Hi, yeah. Again, on the Welsh language, I think there's a gap where home educators are falling through because it's very focused on schools and adults. But I think there's some bills going through now and things, and it's been observed that the home educators are falling through the gap. I am a home educator, and I'm without forking out an awful lot of money, myself and my children, we can't learn Welsh. It's to find it out of our means. So I think there's a place there that could be filled.
That's a really good point, actually, and there are a lot of educational resources through the medium of Welsh that can be provided. They're free resources that you can access. So that's something we need to pick up. Thanks for raising that.
Thank you.
Councillor Hodges next.
Thank you, Chair. All I was going to say is that COVID has wreaked havoc with so many schemes, and they're starting only now to come back. This includes sort of the way that we provide education, adult level education. What I would say is when it comes to Welsh medium, Welsh learning in particular, there have been so many new schemes online and means of doing it, which perhaps are a bit more fun than doing it in a sort of classroom type setting. Horses for courses, really. Some people improve in a more formal setting, other people in an online with their sort of peers doing their own thing. But there's plenty of learning going on out there, and we just perhaps need to have a jiggle, have a reset, and relaunch perhaps. But there's plenty of it going on. There's no worries there.
Yeah. If I could just respond to that, I am a Welsh learner in the Vale, and I am learning online, initially in a classroom setting. I actually really find the online learning fun. I love it when we're put into, the online chat groups, and it's convenient for me. I would say that there are some that prefer to be in the classroom, and so something that we're looking at now with each individual class is if the majority want to be online, then that course will move online. But you are right, Councillor Hodges, there is plenty of learning going on, and we just need to ensure that we continue to incentivise people across the Vale and actually our own staff in the council as well to join these classes. I've found it hugely beneficial.
Just to add to that, because yeah, I agree, Nick. That's a really, really good point. And some of the things that we're doing in libraries, for example, with the tablet loan scheme, we'll be able to have access to folks who might not have some of that technology at home to do some of these online courses. And some of the new provision we've put in place, like the makerspace, for example, in Penarth, and we're looking to put one of those in Barry as well. And then the Western Vale. I mean, those are opportunities to learn new skills through the medium of Welsh as much as we do them in the medium of English. So different learning styles for different folks in different places and different opportunities. So it's one of the core tenets that we've put in our West. But yeah, it's a really good point. Thanks,
Trevor. There's just one other thing from me about page 161 about public libraries. There was a £10,000 grant from the Welsh Government. I was just wondering if you were satisfied about that has been spent in a productive way, and you got good outcomes on that spend.
You'll have to refresh my memory, Sora. We had 91 grants over the last 3 months.
Yeah, no, it was
sorry.
Page 110, you said?
Yeah, sorry, page 161.
Oh, sorry, 161.
CPM/102. We're getting very into the details.
I
was just curious because I saw there was a £10,000 grant from Welsh Government on I guess hosting events in public libraries. I saw David Baddiel did a free one, which is great. But I was just wondering about how you felt that was spent.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we've used that. We've had a couple of events and guest authors and lecturers come. The David Baddiel event, I think we had something like 750 folks come to the Barry Memo. That was a really good opportunity. Not only did it give us something to do through the libraries, but it was done in partnership with the Barry Memo, which was a better venue to host that kind of stuff. Certainly, one of our key aims of objectives now is not just to try and get folks back through the doors into their local libraries, but to widen the availability of stuff that's on offer there, because libraries aren't just about books. We are a very inclusive Vale, so we've had talks from all kinds of folks from all kinds of walks of life, and we do lots of different author events, and now we do them, as I say, places like the Memo, places like the Penarth Pierce Pavilion. 10,000 is a drop in the ocean, and we'll happily take more, and we will be applying for more for these sorts of events. Yeah.
Thanks, Trevor. I don't see any other hands unless anyone's last chance for. No. Okay. Good. Thanks, Paula and Trevor. It was really really interesting. So again, I move we note the monitoring report. If anyone wants to second that. Lovely. That's the last thing on the agenda. That's there's no urgent matters. So unless Amy has anything to add or anything I've missed out, which is a possibility.
No, thank you, Chair. That's everything. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thanks to everyone for coming and contributing and listening. Really appreciate it. So the next committee meeting scheduled for, I think it's the 8th of September. So obviously won't be meeting in August, but I hope everyone has a nice summer.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.